come to the last session before we get the questions. So this is going to be combining Canvas and Numbas to automate Python coursework sign-offs by Ian M Davies at Swansea. Ian, you're mute.
I will share my screen. Right, so let's do this. There we go. So hopefully you can see a PowerPoint slide.
Yeah.
Yes, excellent. Okay, so last year we were running Python labs in a traditional manner with 3 or 4 members of staff, PhD students providing support to students. And we were signing the work off at the end of the session with a, if you like, a micro to small viva voce. Now, with the lockdown in place and working on the principle that we wouldn't be able to do that, I had to rejig how things would work very quickly and try and work out a way to maintain the integrity of the sign-offs and but allow students to do this remotely if they were, not in residence. We were using Jupyter notebooks, which, as you might know, gives you a combination of markdown text and embedded Python cells. That always seemed to be a good way of mixing the material and allows us to flag up the relevant supporting presentations. So this was the expectation. We'd have materials hosted on Canvas, small chunked materials for self-study, lots of small toy exercises, coursework, a very, very carefully structured timeline, bearing in mind these were foundation level 3 students. And in terms of what we expected with regard to teaching time, there was going to be a 1 hour review lecture on the Friday. There'd be a Python support session of length a couple of hours, and the Python coursework would have to be signed off remotely. In terms of what I was used to, Canvas was a new VLE for us. The talking head presentations were done via Panopto, something else which one had to learn. And then the lecturing was via Zoom, as we'd all had a bit of experience earlier in the academic year. The choices I had in terms of coming up with a sign-off system, I could either go for a fully randomized setup managed by an OKPY server. Okay, now we didn't have one to hand, and I didn't have the time, experience, or resource available to get one up and running. I could go for semi-randomized Python coursework with the data being generated, and I do mean the data sets being generated on the students' PCs. And then the worry was, how do I handle things like histograms, scatter plots, graphs, etc. And the other possibilities was to do essentially micro viva voce sign-offs using breakout rooms. And we wouldn't have the staff or the time available to do that. And then everything became clear when I realized that we could make use of suppressed outputs for the graphics and use those as the key bits of information to demonstrate, for students to demonstrate that they could handle the tasks required. Okay, so what I had to do was to build, if you like, a synoptic sign-off section onto the end of each of the notebooks. These would require a few randomized input parameters. And then the key important point was to build a system which would automatically generate suites of input parameters and generate the answers and then combine them so that in order to use a Numbas exam or question to handle the passing the parameters to the students and checking on the student answers, I really only wanted to have the Numbas system handling about 20 small arrays for the class size we had. of length less than 8. So this was why I wanted the data generation to be done locally, but to be in a controlled manner, so we'd have some similarity. And on reflection, I was doing things like this in the mid-1990s, but for a smaller class in the environment of Mathematica. Now, we've had the classes. We're just about to have the examination tomorrow. We had face-to-face support for 3/4 of the class, 1/4 studying online only. What I put in place allowed that 1/4 to engage with the material, to demonstrate that they were achieving the learning outcomes. We were using Gradebook to check on progress. People did fairly well. Not everybody did, you know, a stellar submission. More importantly, I think the student surveys gave us the feedback that the students were very supportive of what we did and how we did it. In terms of hardware, there was remote access to the PCs in the labs. Most students used Anaconda Navigator locally. And in terms of the initial structures, I put together some introductory videos for how to use Jupyter Notebook, how to engage with the Numbas exam, etc. And this also provided a good base for the online stats test that we ran later on. And that's all I want to say. So I'm happy to take questions in the Q&A section.
Indeed, right. Thanks for that. I couldn't find the right button there. That's at least I was looking for it. Got off to a good start today. Right. Okay. So yes, Q&A now. I'm going to hand over to Michael. Well, thanks to all our speakers, of course, but I'll thank them again in a minute, no doubt. But hand over to Michael for the Q&A.
A couple of questions have just come in. One from Richard Snape aimed at Ian, asking about whether the integration with Numbas was free and whether there were any kind of particular issues for that. So Ian, I don't know whether you want to come back on and respond to that, or whether you want to type in a response.
I will type in a response, but the Numbas integration was reasonably problem-free. I'd had experience using Numbas on Blackboard previously. The only thing I had a bit of grief with was solved in collaboration with colleagues in the local IT, but mainly through conversations with the people in Newcastle, that one had to tick the open in a new window button when setting up the assignment. That made it work perfectly. Everything else, it just failed terribly. So that was a local issue with us, I think. But the Numbas integration was fine. I have a colleague who has written a nice little checklist of things to do when you're setting the questions up and setting the exam up, and then how you integrate it onto the Canvas system. But no, it all worked rather nicely, actually. Okay.
Brilliant. Thank you, Ian.
Oh, and with reference to someone asking about the OKPY server, I'm going to encourage my colleagues in computer science to do that.
Wonderful. Thanks, Ian.
There you go.
I think that's probably a good opportunity, I think, for us to grab sort of 8-9 minutes or so of a quick break.